Sasha to the stage, Sasha Reed's the Senior Director of Industry Transformation at Procore Technologies. Sasha showcases today's most innovative leaders who deploy human-centric approaches to solve business challenges in our construction industry. She invests in advancing construction through her involvement as the co-founder of the Construction Progress Coalition. That sounds exciting. And was a former board member with the National Building Museum and has past involvement with NIBS and BIM and a plethora of subcommittees. Her whole vita is in your app, but right now, join me in welcoming Sasha to the stage. Sasha, good to have you with us today. Thank you. Take your time. You've got 20 minutes.
Thank you. Man, I was enjoying that presentation. And I was saying, I have a feeling that you all are feeling very data rich, as they say right now. There's a lot of information that was shared with you, and a lot of information that I'm sure isn't shocking or surprising. But if you're like me, you find yourself sitting here hearing a lot of this information and data, and I ask myself, but why? Why is that? That's very curious to me. I'm understanding and seeing the trends and what the data is telling us, but a big piece of me sits back and says, what's the narrative? What's the story? Why are we seeing what we're seeing? And I have the pleasure of working as an observer of you all. Just a brief, quick introduction. I actually started in this industry over 20 years ago. I worked for a specialty contractor, and I did not have a background in the industry. They essentially asked me two questions. Are you hardworking? Are you smart? To Mike's part, hiring people from the farm. Were you able to get up early and work hard? And I said, yes and yes. And they said, you're hired. And over 20 years ago, that started my life in a trajectory that gave me a career that I don't even think I had imagined for myself, let alone my parents. And so I'm incredibly passionate about being a participant of this industry in having and fostering conversations that allow us to look at that data and maybe start asking ourselves, why is that? And then from the why, maybe starting to ask each other, how did you solve that? And I find that there's an incredible thing that happens when we engage and chat and talk with each other about some of the things that we're curious about or that we're challenged about. And that is that we recognize there's actually genius amongst us when we share our insights, our questions, and potentially even our answers with each other. And so what I want to do today, got the clicker, I want to talk to you about the future of construction. The two previous speakers who spoke before me did a fantastic job of setting the macro view for all of us, which normally I don't have the privilege of having that done. And I'm such a huge fan of FMI. I'm so grateful for the work that you all do in this industry. You really help us take that 30,000-foot view of a very deep trough of inefficiencies or a challenge or a problem that we're too close to really creatively solve, and you bring the best and brightest minds together to do that. So it's a real honor to follow you today. So some of this I'm going to kind of skip through quickly because they've already set the macro stage, but let's just go on this journey together. There's $22 trillion that we're anticipating to be spent in our industry by 2040. This number previously was $15 trillion in 2023. That's an exponential growth factor. And I think some of the economic news that we heard today, that's not a surprise that there's this incredible growth factor, but I think some of us are wondering, will there be a bubble? Will there be a bubble that pops? Is AI really truly going to deliver everything it promises, or we find ourselves yet again trying to come and dig ourselves out of a hole? $22 trillion, when we look at that at the macro level, there's something I want to bring to a point here, which is that is speaking to where our up and to the right growth is. Currently, our industry is experiencing a little bit of a disconnect. On one side, we're seeing tremendous growth, and that $22 trillion number, I don't think anyone here would argue with that. And if you do, you can. This is the place you can argue with me. But what we're also seeing is as that number's growing, so is our risk accelerating. And that risk is accelerating in various ways, and it can be measured in different ways. I'm a huge data nerd, so I like the data because it allows me to see something abstractly in black and white, and I can then abstract from that the curiosity, but why? And bring those two together. So here, $500 billion in rework. That's how much we as an industry, as your capital dollars are being deployed on these projects, that's how much collectively that is being dedicated to rework. 35% of construction professionals spend their time doing non-productive work. Having come from the industry, I was the annoying young person in the office who was like, for the love of God, can we please use purpose-built technology? Don't make me use Adobe Acrobat. It does not do what construction needs it to do. And I ended up leaving the industry to go work for a company called Bluebeam back in the day. And that was very purpose-built for the industry. And what I saw in that moment, when something is purpose-built, it actually solves the problem, but it also makes your life and the work a heck of a lot more enjoyable. So if we think about rework, that is not just a number. Imagine if 35% of your day was spent just reworking things. Look, we all live in modern times. We used to be able to have a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, maybe if you're ambitious and very stable, a 12-year plan. You all think on a longer time horizon because of your capital planning. But imagine if on an annual basis, 35% of the work and energy you put in had to be redone. As a human being and as builders by nature are GSD people. Anybody know what GSD stands for? Thank you. I knew that you would know. And thank you for the cleaned up version. It's good to see you. Getting stuff done. That means by psychological, demographic, by personality, these are people who like to get from conversation into action and getting stuff done. And currently, 35% of their daily lives is in doing rework. That creates a bit of a frustration point. So if you think about the numbers we looked at, the generations who are in our industry, those who are staying and those who are leaving, but why? Could this be one of those factors? That 35% of the time that they spend ends up getting done in rework? And when I was in the field and I was working with my crews, and I would have to come back in the next day after they had installed everything on the docket for that day, and said, oh, whoops, somebody missed something, we have to tear that out, and we have to reconfigure it. I would look in their eyes. I would look in those installers and laborers' eyes. And the really good professional ones would just do, yep, okay. The ones who had short fuses and didn't necessarily have that professional would be like, are you kidding me? Do you know how long we worked yesterday? I say this because I want to make sure we get really curious about the statistics, the data that we're looking at, and ask ourselves, what impact does that have? Could that be why we're seeing some of those younger generations leaving our industry? I would venture to say that that number is incredibly high, but I actually don't have data to tell me how that compares to a knowledge worker in a corporation. But when we're talking about people whose physical bodies are being put out there day in and day out, it's a higher cost to them if there's rework. It's just something to consider and think about. And then finally here, 81% of organizations lack confidence or not confident in the data that their projects are producing? Just by show of hands, just because I want to see where you all sit. How many of you would say that, let's start at 50%, that you have a 50% confidence in the data that is handed over to you on your projects? That it's complete, accurate? Shoot, I started too high. How many of you would say on 40% of your projects, you're confident that the data is accurate, complete? 40% of your projects? Let's go for 20. How many of you would say that on, not even a third, on 20% of your projects, you're confident the data is complete and accurate? Okay, so that shows that this is a bit of a conservative number here. It's not really reflective based on this audience. And this audience really matters because you are where the buck stops. You are where the capital flourishes, where the capital is deployed and that it is regenerated. So that's a very important economic factor for us to think about as an industry. If hardly anyone in this room is confident in the data that is handed over to you. So I'm going to bring us to this next slide. Obviously, these are things we're talking about today. I'm really glad to hear the echo of the economic factors and the things that are really struggling with this industry. And so skilled labor, projects ending at a loss, poor risk management, yet we're spending $11.5 billion on technology. So there used to be a day when I first entered the industry, and especially when I first came into the technology side, I think Procore and Bluebeam actually started the very same year. Both started as startups the very same year. Completely different businesses, completely different philosophies, but both started that same year. And that year, there were barely any software companies that were fully dedicated to construction. And so when we look at the amount of spend that is being spent here, $11.5 billion, how much of that is actually getting recouped into the project confidence, the outcomes of your projects? According to Deloitte, 70% of digital transformation initiatives fail. Sorry, this sounds like, wow, what a downer, this whole, some of this data's been. I promise we're gonna get to solutioning. As a contractor, it's really hard for me to stay in this space without just getting stuff done. But that should be a signal to us. That should be a signal from our market and from our industry that we're not quite operating as effectively, we're not getting curious as to the why, and we're not doing a very good job of interlocking arms to ask each other how. Who's overcome this? How did you overcome that? So if we know that 70% of the digital transformations fail, according to Deloitte, the #1 reason for that failure is because the culture of the business wasn't ready for change. So that satisfied my mind, being somebody who really likes and gets curious about like, wow, that sucks, 70%. I wonder why that is. Do we know? Do we actually have data? And the good news is they said yes, it's the culture of the business. So I don't think that shocks anyone in this room. You're keenly aware, as sitting in that owner's seat, and even in the contractor seat, that there's only so much in your scope of what you can actually impact and affect. And how the architect is collaborating with the general contractor, how they're managing their supply chain and their subs, specialty contractors, a lot of that is somewhat out of your control. However, that was good timing. That was really good timing. I like it. Little Clint Eastwood. That is telling us that if we think of these factors that are out of our control, and culture is the #1 reason why digital transformations fail. And by the way, that is not a statistic just for construction. Those are all industries. means we're in really good company. But if I know anything about this industry, it's that most of construction as an industry are family businesses that have grown over time. Most of the big contractors you're partnering with to deliver your projects was once upon a time a mom and pop shop. And they've just gained momentum, the upper growth we talked about, gained momentum over time. But they haven't culturally adapted. They haven't culturally aligned to what we're seeing within the realm of business broadly. If knowledge workers and other industries like banking and finance are probably some of the ripest for AI, but they're also some of the most culturally aligned businesses, their digital transformations have way more feedback loops within the nature of the business. So when something starts to go kilter, they're actually able to measure. I call them like communication nodes. Box once did a graphic of looking at data sharing by industry, and finance by far had the most connection points within the organization connecting those communication. Construction, by contrast, looked like almost like a black hole. It was a speckled here and there, but almost no loops feeding that information back. So if we know this about our industry, and if we know that culture is one of those pieces, what does that mean for you as the owner? How does that show up for you? Well, I think it's easy to say that as the owner, there's only a certain amount of things that you can actually affect change and you can actually control. So one of the things that Procore has done is actually start to get very curious about the factors and what's impacting and driving that $11.5 billion number. And see, are there areas within this industry that you can focus your energy and your time on that would allow you to reverse some of that number, claw back some of that number, and actually impact your business? So Procore did a Future of Construction report, and in that report, we looked at defining what we saw the future to be based on our customer data, our expertise, the conversations that we're having. We started a report, being very curious, letting FMI do some of their more heavy-hitting granular data. We took a little bit of a broader look at this. And one of the things that we decided was there seemed to be 4 pillars that really impact our industry that if business leaders focus on, can move the needle. The 4 pillars: what does productivity in the future look like for our industry? What does workforce look like for our industry? What does decision-making in the future look like for our industry? And how is design going to evolve? Those are 4 areas that, although may not be directly under your purview, those areas directly impact the lack of hands being raised about the trust in the data. Because each of those pillars involves a culture, norms of relationships, contracts. There's all these pieces that fit within those pillars that either makes or breaks your project and your overall portfolio. We were looking at these 4 pillars and say, but the 4 pillars have to sit on something consistent. And so we believe that the delivery mechanism for addressing those 4 pillars is focusing on people, having a platform that connects them, and the data. If your ability to have data that you trust is paramount, and based on the small little survey we did here today, I would say I imagine it is, these are the future areas that we want to talk about today. So we talked a little bit about the contributing factors, and I won't belabor these because we've been discussing them. But Who here is surprised to see, on average, 1 day per week is spent searching for the data? Does that seem high? Does that seem low? Does that seem spot on? Yeah. So I don't think any of this is new news for you. So if we're thinking about workforce and decision making, right here we're going to see a very specific slice of how people are interacting and how their day-to-day job is that's impacting their experience working in our industry. These are the challenges that a lot of you are facing. This is what we're looking at. Capital is not cheap. And even with some of the inflation adjustments, we're still not seeing an end at the light at the end of the tunnel on any of this. And to top it all off, that experience is retiring. So, you know, it's a fun little mix that we're dealing with here today. So one of the things that I want to share with you as we think about this future state is that I don't think anything that you heard here today from a data reporting was probably shocking or went against what you are already sensing. But now you have data, so you actually have some concrete information as to what is happening. But let's get a little bit curious about the why. Why is it happening, and what can we do about it? Talking about the future of our industry can be a little bit challenging. Over the last 18 months, I have been leading workshops with owners, general contractors, and specialty contractors to talk about this future state of construction. Because there's so many in this room, my 20 years is dwarfed by many of your experience in this room. I'm usually the old person in the room. And let me say that differently. I'm usually the experienced one in the room. And in this room, my experience is absolutely dwarfed because I am old too. But what is different here is that we have enough lived experience that we know the future can look wildly different than it did when we started. So we actually have belief that things can pivot and change, and market restraints can become surpluses. Constraints become surpluses. We're seeing it in 2025. Regulation becomes deregulation. So we know that these swings exist. But the problem with thinking about the future is we often think about the future based on what we know today, what we've experienced up to this point. And that can make it really difficult to think about a completely different state in the future. My challenge to you today, we're going to do a workshop here in a minute. So the proactive, you engaging piece is coming up here. And I hope this will be a welcome change of pace, because you've been taking in a lot of information. But what we're going to do here is actually talk about what that future state could look like. And we're going to discuss what are the challenges, what are the things that are holding us back. Good news is you just had all that data dump, so it's going to be top of mind. The labor shortage is holding us back, lack of communication, lack of digital literacy, lack of training. We're going to have top of mind what's anchoring us and holding us back. But I very quickly want to move from that to a group discussion around, well, where are our tailwinds coming? What's actually propelling us forward? What's actually getting us there faster? And my ask of each of you is to dig deep within your lived experience to potentially suspend reality and base on what you've seen in the cyclical nature of this industry. Imagine some of those constraints are moved. And what does that future state look like, and how are we going to get there? What have you experienced in the past that was an absolute blocker, where something external or internal changed, and that all of a sudden, that anchor was converted into a tailwind? I know each of you here have stories about that. That's the question I want to ask. So what we did is we, Procore, created a report. And so about 18 months ago, we actually went out to industry. We interviewed your peers across the globe. We did workshops. We had conversations. And we've compiled all of that data into a future state of construction report. But we didn't just want to launch a report, because frankly, getting somebody's attention and time to read something is incredibly expensive these days. And I'm not talking dollar amount. I'm talking about your attention span. Very difficult to keep it, very difficult to get it, and very difficult for you to actually spend time ingesting the information. So we decided not just to publish this report, but we would do engagements like this, keynotes and conversations where we'd actually workshop with you looking at that future state of construction. So here is the actual report. We've given you a QR code to download it. I encourage you to download it because the conversation, the workshop we're about to do, our gift to you, my gift to you today, is to take you on a walkthrough of how to do this work. But I mentioned that the genius and the magic comes when you actually speak to your peers, when you talk to your teams, and you say, get curious with them, why is this happening? What have you done to solve it? What ideas do you have? What have you tried? What have we not tried? What do you need in order to stay in this industry? What do you need in order to give me better confidence in the data you're handing over to me? So the report will give you the ability to do that. So just quickly, future of productivity. Our vision is that in the future, everything that should and could will be augmented by automation and augmentation. There is so much low-hanging fruit in our industry today where certain parts of the work we do should absolutely have already been digitized. And with that digitization comes the digitalization, which is the transforming of the business. But what I've seen is the fax machine turn into the email, turn into ignoring your email, wishing email would die and go away, to email, Slacks, Messenger, text messages, private emails, photographs, sometimes still fax. So we haven't really streamlined this communication. We've just continued to add technology to it. There is so much that we can deploy AI and agentic AI to take that low-hanging fruit and not only make our time of communication more productive, remember that 35% of rework, reduce rework, and potentially make the job of being a builder in this industry more interesting. So currently, of those that we surveyed, 55% of construction leaders believe it's likely or extremely likely that automation will transform their business. And that what we originally started this research out, we were saying, let's think 10 years into the future. Let's really push your imagination. And as we started having more and more conversations, what we heard was, you guys are saying things that are 10 years, but we actually have pilots, live pilots now, with total robotic stations, with robo-dogs. We have a lot of this that we're doing already. So 5 years is actually now what we thought was kind of aggressive, is now conservative. These things they see coming in the next 2 to 3 years. So the future of the workforce, it really lies in empowering our workers. What is one of the easiest ways or one of the fundamental ways of empowering somebody? Giving them access to information to make decisions well. Decreasing that rework. With 42% of the construction industry specifically about to retire by 2036, we're not in a position to wait and see on this one. This is something that needs to be very critical to what we're doing today. In order to maximize use of the experienced individuals in our industry now, in order to train the next generation of workers coming up, we need to think differently about knowledge sharing, training, and upskilling. 96% of organizations are currently experiencing a generation challenge. Well, what does that have to do with training? If you think back to, I think back to the dark ages when I started in the industry, and I think to how I learned. I came in with no industry experience, but I worked very closely with another woman in the business who had been there for 35 years and knew everything. And I was a sponge. and she was gladly teaching me everything that she knew. And I took that information and was able to learn very quickly. We have seen, especially in the owner space, owners bring people back out of retirement into their organization and just have them videotaped or dictate how they did the job that they did, gathering as many best practice stories as they could, because those are now being incorporated into large language models that is now feeding best practices. So even though that individual may be in South Carolina on the golf course, enjoying their retirement, part-time, they're coming back and they're serving this role as an oracle or a storyteller. It's not too far off to think of using meta glasses while you're on the phone with somebody who's looking at what you're looking at. Oh, yes, okay, I see what you're doing. Let me see. I just did this past week with my husband who's in LA, and I was in Austin, Texas, and I was trying to figure out where a tool was. He's like, put your camera on, let me help you find it. This is something I think we do in our personal lives, and there's absolutely no reason why we couldn't do it in our professional lives. If we're looking at the generational challenge of how we bring those generations together, and only 47% of us are doing intentional training, intentional co-mentoring, 96% of us are having this challenge, but only 47 are actually incorporating this into the business. There's some room to grow here. The future of design. This one is a little bit controversial with architects and engineers, but we believe that the future of design will transfer to builders. The more those builders are able to leverage automation to bring their businesses into the modern age and capture that data, the more data they're going to have in forms of pre-construction, handover, et cetera, that will improve the project that you're building. 65% of those that we interviewed believed that effective pre-construction was one of the most effective ways of reducing rework. And we found that that's to be true below their peers. So just looking at that design information, that construction information informing design. So finally, the final one, the future of decision making. This is really what's coming down to the nuts and bolts of our industries. How are people making decisions? How informed are those decisions? How do we track the decision? And then how to report that a decision was made? At the end of the day, when that project is wrapped up and rolled over and handed to you, you don't really care how many hands it went through to get to its final state. You just want to understand what was the start, what was the decision, and then what was the final state. You want the project to advocate for itself. This is what we believe the future of the industry will be, through those automation, through greater information sharing, that the future of our industry is going to be data-driven, and that decisions will be made with better data. Clearly, we're not alone. This is not us being forecasters in what's happening, because 80% of those that we interviewed agreed that access to historical data is important, and that having data connected across their project teams was also critical to the business. So what we're seeing is a little bit of a orchestration or a complex organization of information and data. So what we're looking here is, look at this as a hybrid decision model. So you have those who are invested in, have done the work effectively. You have those who are newer to the work, who are hungry sponges learning, wanting to learn or wanting to implement or wanting to do things differently. And then you're going to have information that's coming from your IoT, so your Internet of Things. You're going to have information that's coming in from automated data centers. So historical, IoT device automation, all of that is going to come together. What do we get from that? Well, this is what will drive our insights, our predictive analytics, and our automation. The bottom of this, the base we feel of all this, is that it means that those who are on your jobs will make more effective, better decisions. But how do we get there? I don't think we're going to get there right away, even though the future is coming quickly. I think because culture is at the heart of what we're trying to do here, we need to approach this as a crawl, walk, run. And especially when you're talking about AI, crawl, walk, run is essential. probably more than in any time in our history in leveraging technology as an industry. So crawl, standardize, data hygiene, being able to make sure that the data that you're creating is trusted. This is something that happens very much at the contractor level, but you as an owner have a lot of influence here. You have the ability to say, this is what matters to me. This is the data we want to see, and this is why it matters, and it's a non-negotiable. Well, that last one I'll leave to you. Decide if you want to make it that harsh. Walk. Now that we have trusted data, how do we partner that with AI so that we can actually start to get insights? So we're actually thinking 10 steps ahead of where we are instead of reacting to 10 things that went wrong today. And then run. Once we have trusted AI and we have insights in the business, how can then we rely on that AI to make recommendations and to further automate some of that work, eating more and more away at that 35% rework number? Essentially what I'm saying is that I believe that we as an industry need to become better at smoke detecting and stop being firefighters. I am guilty of this. I chose this industry because I'm a little bit type A, and I really love solving problems. It's almost like the way my brain works. I'm addicted when I can solve a problem. If I have a hard task in front of me or a quick fire drill, I will always choose a quick fire drill because it gets my blood pumping, makes me feel alive, makes me feel effective, makes me feel like I GSD'd today. But this is not going to sustain us as an industry. Culturally, we cannot continue to support this type of activity within our user base, within our customer base, within our projects, within our partners. We need to look for partners who are telling us how they're becoming smoke detectors. How are they leveraging technology in order to make sure that data is better and trusted? Don't just accept at face value, oh, we're doing BIM and we're leveraging AI. Like, great, those are great buzzwords, but this is a partnership. Tell me a story. How did that happen? Get curious. So here's the part where we're going to hand this over to you and do a quick exercise. So essentially, I'm going to ask my assistants, if they don't mind, I'm going to pass out some Sharpies and some Post-it notes, and I'm going to ask that you don't have to move. If you want to turn around to become part of a group, you can, but gather in groups of 3. Try to make sure it's not just 2 of you. If it's just 2 of you, turn around and see if you can pull somebody in. But just within your areas, look around and make eye contact with somebody and say, okay, we're a group of 3. And in this group of 3, we're going to have you start to think about some of these questions that I spoke of earlier. We're going to ask the question of what's holding us back. So when we think of these future states, and I think today we really should be talking about decision-making and trusting data, because what we just saw with those raised hands shows us that this is a major challenge for us as an industry and for you as owners wanting to get better at capital planning, portfolio management. This is imperative to your business. So let's look at that future of decision-making where things are automated, information is served up to us, the 35% of rework has been reduced. What's holding us back from doing that today? So then I want you to write on Post-it notes. You don't have to have a discussion at first. Just start writing on Post-it notes all the things that you think are anchors, all the things that are holding us back. Then I'm going to stop you after about 4 minutes. So this is going to be fast, y'all. Going to have to be right into active mode now. So after about 4 minutes, I'm going to switch you over, and we're going to start talking about what are the wins. This is where you're going to say, well, we had this as a blocker, but actually we solved that by doing X, Y, and Z. Or, hey, this is still a blocker. It's been a blocker. We haven't solved it. Has anyone solved this? Does anyone know if someone solved this? So start talking amongst yourselves around what are those wins? What are the things that are happening? Maybe there isn't something that's on your table as a blocker right now, but you're like, this is really helping us right now. It could be a regulation change. It could be something external factor. It could be we have a new board member who's just gets it, and their board member who was in our way finally got out of the way, and now we have a clear path. Whatever it is, start to think about it in those terms. Then if you think about, as we start to get closer to that future state vision of decision making, what would some of the potential risks be that could be in our path in 5 years? I will give you a little bit of the clue of what we're looking for here. This exercise is an exercise in resilience and building resilience. You want to have a team who can say, this is the problem, and clearly articulate, this is what we're identifying as a problem. Then get curious amongst each other. How has anyone else solved this? What's working for us? What can we use that's working for us to help us keep forward? And then as you're progressing, this will continue to be the nature of business, is we will continue to have to do this exercise of looking at what's in our way, and then who's solved that problem, how can we incorporate that and solve it for ourselves. This is the takeaway, which is why we wanted to give you the report and why you have this slide deck, because you can have this conversation with your team. So here's how it's gonna go. 4 minutes on the clock. We're gonna start with what are the current challenges. Then we'll move on to what are your current wins and what's momentum. And then finally, what hidden or unexpected risks do you want to see in the future? All right, time starts now.
Do some real quiet. Just a little bit of quiet.
It's like I can dress it up, but I don't feel like I wrote to work out. I always think these go very well. Obviously, some people look for like really work jobs.
I want you. I need. Give me substance, give me proofs, give me presence, give me you, give me substance, give me proofs, give me presence. Let it show that I met with you. Let it show that I met with you. Let it show that I met with you. Let it show that I met with substance,
Okay. If you
In this
haven't started
atmosphere,
writing on your Post-it notes and you're just
give
talking,
me
I love that. But I'm a data nerd. I need your writing. Each of the Post-it notes that you write, we will go through after and take photographs of it. We're going to use that to reflect back to you what the conversation was at a peer level. So I don't want to say purely legible, but fairly legible. And make sure the conversations you're having get onto Post-it notes. You guys are like rock star team. I'm really impressed with what I'm seeing here. Massive output. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 Post-its. 10 Post-its. All right. 2 more minutes here, and then we're going to move on to tailwinds.
I will do your will, do your will, do your will, oh God. I will do your will, Lord, I do your will, do your will, oh God. Say not no. Do your will, oh God. Oh, I have come in the volume of the bow. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, really?
like I knew what I was doing after 26 years.
All right, so we are going to move on because many of you have, like we said, the problems were top of mind, so therapy session done. Whew, this is all the stuff that makes this thing so frustrating, and let me put them all down. So now we're moving on to winds, tailwinds, things that are pushing you forward. And I've seen some of you have moved into that already. So let's look at tailwinds and potential future risks together. And we're going to take 5 more minutes for this. And then we're going to have a group discussion where if you've had moments of genius or brilliance or honesty, we're going to have you share with the room. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared. All right, here we go.
They just left. They just went out the door.
Where the hell am I supposed to put this?
Chef Ed?
Well, I was gonna
All right, let's start to wrap it up. Loving all the conversations I'm hearing. And for those who didn't have a team member to chat with, I am fully impressed that our meditative music did not put you to sleep, but it looked like blood pressures were lowered. That's not a bad thing either. All right, so what we're going to do at this point is actually I want to look to some of my helpers who may have been able to hear or overhear some of the conversations. A lot of the anchors we're seeing are very similar, a lot of the same threads, which is not surprising given the data setup you had, all the context setting you had. But I'm really looking for somebody who was able to turn anchor into a tailwind. Does anyone have an anchor into tailwind conversion story? I don't know, you're smiling, so I don't know if that means yes or... Sorry, not you, the gentleman behind you. Do you have a look at those Post-it notes. Is there a conversion story of an anchor to a tailwind? Yes. Or any of the three of you, this group?
Well, I guess, culture stood out for us, and, we see that as, certainly a challenge. Looking to make people on the job site or anyone on the project team to feel empowered, that they're educated, that there's clarity in their roles, that they can have leadership at all levels. What else felt like a...
Those are good tailwinds.
Trying to organize my mess here and make sense of it all.
It's a good list.
Good pre-construction was, or lack thereof as a block. Unforeseen conditions, improper planning, of course, leads to a tailwind where if you can partner early, early risk identification, be transparent and authentic, and focus on partnering early on and bringing partners to the table very early on, working with your contractor early on.
Yep, agreed. It's amazing. We don't necessarily have all of the data to show that, but the anecdotal data definitely says that when you do that, greater outcomes there. How about here? Brent, your group?
Well, I don't know if I got it, but there was a conversation about the level of young people that aren't quite experienced enough to be working where we want them to work, whether that's superintendents or project managers or project engineers. And we've had a couple projects where we've just created like a cohort group of emerging professionals and get them together and let them talk about their concerns, but also give them some guidance. Things like, how does a superintendent build a relationship with a subcontractor? Or how do you talk to an owner? Or how do you talk to a designer? And those 20-somethings have just embraced that, and it completely has turned around job sites where those people were like distant and separated, and everyone wondered like, how come they can't be effective? And all of a sudden they're embracing their role and taking leadership roles. So it's like, if we're gonna do that to people, put them in the spot they're not quite ready for, we have to support them, and it can be done.
Excellent, excellent. And that flies in the face of some of our preconceived ideas. I did one of these sessions in Austin, and there was a young gentleman. I'm sorry I keep saying age. It's such a faux pas. Thank you for your grace for not giving me loud gasps, and shame for how I keep discussing age. My apologies. However, there was this very young gentleman who was under 25 who was sitting at a table, and they were talking about retention and training, and the two senior gentlemen who were leaders of the business were just saying, we can't get them to stay, we can't get young people to stay. And I gave a lot of credit to this young man because he said, if I may speak up, I'm 24, so I'm very young and new to this industry, I just joined, but I have so many friends who are not working, who have not found something they're passionate about, and this industry has problems and challenges and really interesting challenges in spades. And I keep trying to tell them that they should come to the industry, that they should start applying, even if they have no background, just to get their foot in the door. And the challenge is that they're being turned away because they're not seen as qualified, because the qualifications require a different career path than what got them there. So I think one of the things that's really important is looking at what does that generation within the business, going to them directly. What do you need to be supported? What do you see as the path forward? That dynamic, I think, is so key and so important. I think so underutilized is actually just going to that group and asking them that. All right, does anyone else, just one last reflection from this today, and then we'll wrap up.
Thank you, yes. Jay Moser, PTAG. A couple things that come to mind that you could turn into challenges, but I think the first one is the lack of being able to understand you need to change, first of all. Right? I mean, everybody's got different drivers, EPC, suppliers, owners. I think we all have to come to the realization that you have to change. So that becomes a win when you do that, and you could start a collaborative type contract arrangement that incentivizes people to get on the same page, and for the owners to be worried about cost, schedule, safety, quality, and and the EPCs to be worried about those same things rather than the next job or making more money, which can be incentivized, right? So those are some things that really can be helpful. What was the other one? I think maybe that's enough.
That's actually so underrated. FMI has a podcast, Procore has a podcast, and that's actually most of my day job is actually interviewing customers for our podcast. And I had a chance to interview a young startup CEO, and I say young because he's in his 50s like me, CEO startup who had the chance to leave construction and actually create a technology called Scratchy, like little scratch-off gambling cards, because he realized that it was actually quite easy to motivate the field to leverage technology if you just recognized the fact that they were using it to begin with and started to give them incentives. And that interview is very, very interesting because it has a lot of data around incentivization and how do you incentivize, and it's not always so complicated. So with that, I'm going to say thank you so much for participating. Thank you give yourselves a round of applause for breaking into groups and for giving us a chance to present some of our research, and thank you for having me here. Thank you.